One of the most painful experiences a man can have is realizing the woman beside him no longer desires him, but still expects him to stay loyal, supportive, patient, and emotionally available. And most men suffer through that in complete silence for years. They keep hoping things will return to normal if they just love her harder. But here is the brutal psychological truth. You cannot negotiate genuine attraction back into existence. The more desperate a man becomes for reassurance, the more invisible he often becomes inside the very relationship he is trying to save. Because when desire disappears, it is rarely random. It is connected to emotional dynamics that men are almost never taught to recognize early enough to do anything about.
This is Liza from Secrets Inside the Mind. And today I am breaking down why some women stop craving the men they once could not get enough of, the psychological signs that attraction is genuinely fading, and the one mistake that quietly destroys masculine presence faster than almost anything else in a relationship. Subscribe right now, because what I am about to share is the psychological truth most men only discover after it is already too late to change the outcome. Most men think desire disappears in the bedroom. It does not. That is simply where they finally notice it. By the time a woman starts pulling away physically, something deeper has usually been changing for months underneath the surface. The bedroom is only the final translation of a dynamic that already shifted emotionally long before. And this is precisely where men lose themselves, because they become focused on fixing the symptom instead of understanding the deeper message behind it. They focus on frequency, technique, romance, special occasions. They start researching ways to bring the spark back while completely ignoring the emotional atmosphere she has been reacting to silently for months. But genuine desire does not operate like customer service. You cannot negotiate attraction back into existence through increased effort alone. A woman can appreciate you deeply and still not crave you. That is the part most men struggle to fully accept until they have experienced it themselves. I have seen men become almost perfect partners on paper, more attentive, more generous, more emotionally available. Yet the more they tried to earn intimacy back through visible effort, the colder the relationship became. Because desire is not only about comfort, it is also about perception, about emotional tension, about how she experiences you psychologically in the moments that matter most. When a woman no longer feels genuine desire for you, she is often communicating something she may never say directly, something about how she now sees the relationship, something about how she experiences herself inside of it, and sometimes something about how she now sees you compared to who you were when desire was effortless. You cannot fake genuine desire, and you absolutely cannot beg for it without damaging what little remains. Now, let me make something important clear before we go further. Not every period of emotional or physical distance means the relationship is dying. Real life affects desire in real and significant ways. Stress affects desire. Hormonal changes affect desire. Exhaustion, anxiety, grief, medication, the demands of motherhood, overwhelming professional pressure, all of these can temporarily reduce intimacy in ways that have nothing to do with how she feels about you as a man. Mature men need to genuinely understand and hold space for that. But there is a massive and critical psychological difference between a woman struggling with the weight of life and a woman who is emotionally checking out of you specifically. A woman who still genuinely loves you and is simply going through a difficult period will usually try to protect the connection even when desire feels low. She may not want physical intimacy every night, but she still reaches for your hand unconsciously. She still wants to sit close to you. She still checks in on you emotionally. She still visibly cares that the distance between you exists and wishes it were different. You can feel her effort even through the difficulty. But when a woman has mentally and emotionally withdrawn from the relationship itself, the pattern changes completely and unmistakably. The physical affection disappears first. Then the genuine curiosity about your life disappears. Then the warmth in ordinary interaction disappears. Eventually, intimacy starts feeling almost scheduled, mechanical, obligated, something she tolerates rather than something she initiates. The excuses become permanent. She is too tired every night, but somehow has energy to stay on her phone until 2 in the morning. She seems emotionally unavailable and flat with you, but is fully alive and engaged with everyone else around her. That contrast tells you more than any direct conversation ever will. Desire rarely disappears alone. Emotional withdrawal almost always arrives first. The body follows where the mind has already gone. And once a woman begins actively avoiding emotional closeness itself, the problem is no longer temporary distance. It is relational detachment. And most men do not want to look at this too honestly, because once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee what it means. Comment below right now and tell me honestly, what disappeared first in your relationship? The affection, the laughter, or the feeling that she actually genuinely wanted to be around you? When desire starts genuinely dying, it almost never stays isolated to the bedroom. The entire emotional texture of the relationship begins changing. The small things disappear first. The casual touches that used to happen without either of you thinking about them, the playful eye contact across a room, the random kiss in the kitchen, the way she used to lean into you by instinct. Then something even more dangerous disappears: her emotional openness. She stops asking about your life with genuine curiosity. Conversations become logistical, functional, transactional. You start feeling less like a man she is emotionally connected to and more like someone she simply coexists with while both of you manage the practical demands of shared life. Men usually respond to this shift in entirely the wrong way. They panic quietly and suppress the panic simultaneously. They become more accommodating, more careful, more alert to anything that might upset her further. They convince themselves she is just under stress, but deep down, they feel the shift with precision. Every man does, because energy never lies. A woman who still feels genuinely emotionally connected to you naturally looks for ways to stay close even during difficult seasons. But when she begins actively avoiding time alone with you, avoiding vulnerable conversations, avoiding physical touch as though contact itself creates discomfort, you need to stop automatically calling it a phase and start honestly examining what is actually happening. Sometimes she is not avoiding intimacy. She is avoiding emotional exposure specifically to you. And that distinction changes everything about what the situation actually is and what, if anything, can be done about it. That is why some couples can sit on the same couch every single night and still feel like they are on opposite sides of an enormous divide. The relationship still technically exists, but emotionally, the bridge between them has already been collapsing for longer than either of them wants to acknowledge. Now let us talk about something darker that most people deliberately avoid because it makes relationships sound less romantic and far more psychological than we prefer them to feel. Sometimes intimacy stops being about genuine connection and starts functioning as a form of control. In the beginning of most relationships, desire feels spontaneous and effortless. She is genuinely excited to see you. Touch feels completely natural. Passion feels real and unprompted. But once commitment becomes secure and the emotional leverage inside the dynamic shifts, some women begin relating to intimacy differently, sometimes not consciously, but behavior always follows patterns regardless of conscious intention. This is where many men walk straight into a trap they never saw coming. The more disconnected she becomes, the harder he tries. He starts actively performing for affection. More thoughtful gifts, more patience, more emotional labor, more reassurance, more accommodation. He becomes quietly terrified of losing the relationship, so he overinvests in visible ways to try to stabilize what he senses slipping away. But attraction responds very badly to desperation. The moment a man starts treating intimacy like something he must earn through visible submission and accommodation, he quietly but fundamentally changes the psychological power dynamic between them. And women feel that shift immediately, even when they never say a word about it. This is why some men become remarkably generous partners while simultaneously becoming less and less desirable to the very woman they are being generous toward. They believe they are demonstrating devotion, but emotionally, they are communicating fear: fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear that they are no longer enough as they naturally are, and nothing destroys genuine polarity faster than a man trying to purchase emotional security with constant accommodation and endless availability. A woman may genuinely appreciate your effort. She may depend on it. But appreciation and desire are not the same psychological experience. That is the brutal truth that most men spend years learning at enormous emotional cost. Like this video right now, if these psychological patterns are helping you understand something you have been trying to articulate about your own relationship. And subscribe, because what comes next is the part most men genuinely need to hear but rarely do. The more a man chases validation from a woman who is already emotionally pulling away, the more he unintentionally confirms that she holds all the emotional power in the relationship. And what most men and women both fail to fully understand is that repeated rejection changes a man psychologically in ways that go far deeper than most people acknowledge. A man can handle temporary distance. He can handle difficult seasons. He can even endure genuine dry periods inside a committed relationship if he still fundamentally feels wanted and valued underneath all of it. But constant rejection without clarity does something far more damaging than simple frustration. It makes him begin questioning his own fundamental worth. And once that internal questioning begins, the damage spreads into every dimension of how he moves through life. He starts overthinking every interaction with her. He wonders if he became unattractive somehow, too predictable, too soft, too emotionally available. He begins analyzing himself against some vague standard he cannot clearly identify. Some men become obsessively focused on fixing themselves externally: physique, income, social status. Others slowly shut down emotionally and become quieter, more careful, more suppressed inside their own home. But almost all of them lose confidence in ways that extend far beyond the bedroom. Here is the reality nobody talks about with genuine honesty. Sexual and emotional rejection inside a committed relationship does not feel purely physical to a man. It feels existential, because for many men, being genuinely desired is deeply connected to feeling respected, chosen, valued, and admired by the person who knows them most completely. Remove that for long enough, and eventually, he stops feeling like a man inside his own relationship. He becomes quieter, more cautious, more emotionally contracted. He walks carefully around her in his own home, trying not to trigger more distance. And the painful irony is that the more emotionally accommodating he becomes in that state, the weaker he often appears. Understanding is important. Real compassion for a partner going through difficulty is essential. But endless self-erasure is not maturity or emotional strength. If someone keeps you emotionally starving while simultaneously expecting unlimited patience and continued investment from you, eventually you stop feeling genuinely loved and start feeling managed. And being emotionally managed by someone you love is one of the loneliest experiences available to a human being. Now let us talk about the possibility most men are afraid to even consciously consider. Sometimes the desire did not disappear. Sometimes it simply redirected itself. I want to be very clear. This does not automatically mean physical betrayal, but emotional energy always leaves visible traces. Attraction changes behavior. Genuine interest changes behavior. Excitement about someone changes behavior in ways that are difficult to fully conceal over time. A woman who feels emotionally alive somewhere outside the relationship often starts appearing emotionally absent at home. Her phone becomes private in ways it never was before. She smiles at messages she does not explain. She protects conversations that previously would have meant nothing. She has visible energy for everything and everyone except the relationship that exists between you, and the man beside her starts feeling genuinely invisible while watching her become emotionally animated for the rest of the world. Women rarely lose the biological capacity to feel excitement or desire. They lose it in specific emotional environments. That distinction matters enormously. A woman can tell you she is too exhausted for any kind of connection and then stay awake, scrolling, texting, laughing, and engaging for hours afterward. That contrast tells you more than any excuse ever will. People invest their available energy into what emotionally feeds them, and once a man starts noticing that all her warmth Curiosity, femininity, and genuine emotional availability seem to exist everywhere except around him specifically. Something inside him changes permanently. He starts sensing that he is no longer the emotional center of her attention or her inner life. And that realization is genuinely devastating. Most men can tolerate difficult seasons inside a relationship. What ultimately destroys them psychologically is feeling replaceable while still being expected to remain loyal, stable, understanding, and emotionally available at all times without acknowledgement. What many men do next only accelerates the problem. The moment they feel her pulling away with consistency, they overcompensate. They become more available, more agreeable, more emotionally reactive to every shift in her mood. They try harder to visibly demonstrate that they are worthy of being loved again. I understand completely why they do it. When a man feels like he is losing emotional access to the woman he genuinely loves, panic takes over in ways that bypass rational thinking. He believes that visible effort will restore attraction, but desire does not respond well to emotional chasing. In fact, one of the most reliable ways to collapse whatever attraction remains is to make a woman feel that your entire emotional stability now depends entirely on her continuing validation. Because the moment she senses that your sense of identity revolves primarily around keeping her emotionally satisfied, the psychological polarity between you begins disappearing. You stop feeling emotionally grounded and centered. You stop feeling like someone she can lean into. And without fully realizing it, you gradually hand her complete psychological authority over your own self-worth. That is why some men become incredibly devoted partners while simultaneously becoming less and less attractive to their partner. They confuse devotion with emotional strength. But attraction is not built on obedience or endless accommodation. It is built on genuine tension, emotional stability, clear standards, authentic self-respect, and masculine psychological grounding. You cannot beg someone into wanting you. And the more a man sacrifices his own identity and direction trying to keep a woman emotionally satisfied, the more psychologically invisible he often becomes inside the very relationship he is sacrificing himself to preserve. Attraction fundamentally shifts the moment a woman stops experiencing you as a man she looks up to emotionally and starts experiencing you primarily as a reliable source of stability and support. This is the transition most men miss entirely as it is happening. In the beginning, being dependable feels powerfully attractive. You make her feel genuinely safe and emotionally supported. But if the relationship slowly loses genuine tension, authentic challenge, real emotional polarity, and grounded masculine presence, safety quietly transforms into familiarity. And familiarity, when left completely unchallenged, eventually kills desire with reliable predictability. Many men wake up one day realizing they are no longer being treated like a romantic partner. They are being treated like emotional infrastructure, useful, reliable, predictable, necessary, but not deeply desired. You become the man she depends on rather than the man she genuinely longs for. And that distinction changes the entire lived experience of the relationship. I have seen men slowly transform from genuine partners into caretakers without noticing it happening to them in real time. They stop leading, stop challenging their own limits, stop prioritizing their own development and direction. Their entire emotional world becomes about managing her comfort and preventing distance. And over time, the relationship loses its natural masculine and feminine tension completely. Then one day she says something devastating like, "I love you, but I am not in love with you anymore." What she often means psychologically is that the emotional dynamic between you no longer creates genuine attraction inside her. You became necessary, but no longer exciting. Appreciated, but no longer actively pursued. Emotionally safe, but romantically invisible. Comment below and tell me honestly, have you started feeling more valued inside your relationship for what you provide than for who you actually are as a man? Some of the saddest dynamics I have observed are the ones where men have been tolerating emotional starvation for years while genuinely convincing themselves they are being patient and committed. They keep waiting for the relationship to return to what it once was. They tell themselves she is just stressed, just overwhelmed, just temporarily unavailable. So they hold on harder. They suppress their own frustration and their own instincts. Month after month, sometimes year after year, they continue investing in something that is slowly draining the actual life out of them. Because hope can become genuinely addictive, especially when a woman occasionally provides just enough warmth or affection to keep him emotionally attached and unable to fully confront what is actually happening. One good night, one affectionate moment, one burst of genuine closeness after weeks of distance, and suddenly he believes things are finally changing again. But sometimes that is not genuine reconnection. Sometimes that is intermittent reinforcement, just enough emotional reward to prevent him from honestly evaluating where things actually stand. And psychologically, that pattern of intermittent reinforcement is one of the most powerful attachment mechanisms that exists. It keeps men trapped inside cycles that progressively damage their confidence, their identity, and ultimately their self-respect. Over time, they stop asking whether this relationship is genuinely healthy for them and start asking how much more they can endure before she loves them properly again. That question alone should fundamentally concern you, because love should not require you to slowly disappear inside it in order to maintain its existence. So what actually begins to shift the dynamic when desire has started dying? Not begging, not increased visible effort, not becoming more emotionally dependent or more accommodating, and definitely not shrinking yourself further to make the relationship feel stable. The genuine shift begins the moment a man redirects authentic focus back toward himself and his own direction, not as a calculated manipulation, not as a game designed to create jealousy or reaction, but as a genuine psychological reorientation back toward the man he was before he lost himself inside the anxiety of maintaining her approval. Many men slowly stop living fully once a relationship becomes chronically unstable. Their personal routines disappear, their ambition weakens, their standards drop, their emotional world contracts entirely around whether she seems close or distant on any given day. Women feel that contracted energy and respond to it with further withdrawal. But something psychologically significant happens when a man genuinely reconnects with his own direction and purpose. When he starts training again, building something of genuine value again, creating and engaging with life outside the relationship again, setting and holding real standards again, his emotional gravity fundamentally changes. He stops radiating the specific frequency of fear that had been making him invisible. And fearlessness, the real kind, not performed, changes attraction in ways that cannot be faked. Not because women are deliberately cruel or strategic, but because genuine emotional certainty is attractive. Grounded masculine presence is attractive. Real self-respect is attractive. A man who still has authentic purpose and direction outside the relationship feels psychologically entirely different from a man desperately trying to preserve the relationship at any personal cost. And sometimes a woman only fully recognizes what she had after a man stops offering it endlessly and freely without conditions. Here is the psychological truth that this entire conversation has been building toward. Some relationships are already over emotionally long before they officially end. There is no dramatic betrayal, no explosive confrontation everyone can point to as the moment everything changed. Just two people slowly drifting into emotional numbness while allowing routine to masquerade as genuine connection. And that kind of slow, quiet dissolution can be even more painful than open conflict, because nothing looks obviously broken from the outside. The practical functions of shared life continue, but underneath, the intimacy, the genuine admiration, the emotional hunger, and the real romantic tension have quietly disappeared. Staying inside that state does not protect your soul. It erodes it over time in ways that are difficult to fully recover from. You can feel it when a man has spent too many years being merely tolerated rather than genuinely desired. His energy changes in unmistakable ways. His confidence quietly weakens. He becomes emotionally smaller inside his own life. And the real tragedy is not that some relationships end. The real tragedy is forcing yourself to remain emotionally buried inside something that already died years ago, because leaving feels more frightening than the slow erosion of continuing. If you take one genuine thing from this conversation, take this. Women rarely lose desire randomly or without reason. Attraction almost always dies through emotional patterns that went unaddressed for too long. Emotional disconnection, the loss of real respect, the loss of genuine polarity, the gradual absence of authentic masculine grounding, and eventually the physical dimension of the relationship simply reveals what was already true underneath for a long time. You cannot guilt someone into genuine desire. You cannot negotiate authentic attraction through endless accommodation. And the more a man abandons himself trying to keep a woman emotionally satisfied, the more psychologically invisible he typically becomes to her. But every man deserves to be genuinely wanted. Not perfection, not fantasy, but real mutual desire, real mutual effort, real emotional investment, and genuine respect from the person who chose to build a life with him. And if you have been sitting in silent rejection for years, hoping that patience alone will eventually resurrect something real between you, I need you to stop lying to yourself about what that waiting is actually costing you every single day. Because the moment a man becomes more afraid of losing the relationship than losing himself, he has already surrendered far too much of what actually made him worth choosing in the first place. Tell me honestly in the comments, at what point did you realize the emotional dynamic in your relationship had fundamentally changed? Share your experience, because every man reading those comments needs to understand he is not alone in this. Like this video if it gave you genuine psychological clarity about something you have been silently carrying. Share it with a man who needs to hear this before the cost becomes even higher. And subscribe to Secrets Inside the Mind, because the moment you stop begging to be desired is often the exact moment you begin becoming genuinely desirable again. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.